But Ohio State and Michigan, okay? These teams are on a collision course, as they often are. But Michigan blows out Penn State. Yes, it was a game at halftime. It was a game on the scoreboard. If you look at the numbers behind that, Michigan had outgained them about 250 to 10, I think, at halftime. Somehow Penn State found themselves in a close game. J.J. McCarthy threw a pick six. They were right there until they were not in the second half when Michigan pulled away. Ohio State was on bye last week. They play Iowa next week. I would expect quite a few punts in that game from the Hawkeyes, and I would expect quite a few points from the Buckeyes. But the point is, right now, these two teams are in the top four in the AP poll. And the results of this past week have really opened the door for a legitimate chance for both of these teams to make the college football playoff. Yes, one of them has to lose. But if we have an 11-0 versus 11-0 in the final week of the season, and it's a close game, and one of these teams loses, can both of these teams make the playoff? Or better yet, will they both make the playoff? Felder, what do you think?
I think it depends on what happens in the SEC, obviously, and what happens with TCU. But at the end of the day, is Michigan good?
Oh, come on, Max. Come on.
I mean, my thing is that until proven different, we've got to assume Michigan is for real because they're doing it. And here's the thing. It's not those 10-6 games, right? It's not like watching Iowa play every week, right? They're actually putting 40-plus points up.
But did you see what those 40 points look like?
Yeah, exactly. Blake Corum, who I would have picked as my skill guy for like the third out of the last 6 weeks.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like this kid is the workhorse of workhorses. Listen, if I found a mule half as good, listen,
what's his name that played for the Steelers and then went to the Jets? That Mark D'Antonio ran into the ground hard.
Le'Veon Bell.
Le'Veon.
Yeah. He's doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, he's doing the same thing. Yeah,
with a few less hurdles involved. I was in school when Le'Veon Bell was in school. There were quite a few hurdles weekly there. I haven't seen from Blake Corum. But
I'm Greg. I'm young.
Yeah, no Michigan State stuff here from me, Felder. Look, I do feel obligated to at least push you back on this idea of who have they beaten, right? Because I heard all of this last week, but that's not it.
It's not about who have they beat. It's about how they win football games. And if you're going to get to a point, because listen, we just spent 25 minutes talking about Alabama, in a loss, but they scored 49 points against a comparable opponent in a way where they had to score 49 points. Michigan this year, how many times have they had to score 40? They got 40 points because the other team laid down. Same thing happened what was it, last week with Indiana?
Yeah, it's 31-10. Yeah, but close enough. You're right.
But those other teams lay down, and like you can beat them into submission, and that's fine. But at the end of the day,
who's going to do it? Who's going to do it on
the only person on their schedule is Ohio State. That's it. That's the only team.
They'll be undefeated going into that game. Yeah. So, and then you look at it and you're like, well, this is the way the schedule fell. So a one-loss, say it's a one-loss Michigan. Let's just say Ohio State beats Michigan. Let's just run the analysis.
Okay, and you know what? Let's add the next part in too, because we got to add. Let's add it all together, right?
Okay, yeah. So
we have Ohio State undefeated. One loss Michigan.
Got it.
We get Tennessee. Maybe Tennessee does lose to Georgia.
Okay.
Tennessee, one loss Tennessee.
But they're not in the championship game.
Not in the championship game.
Yeah.
Georgia
undefeated
loses to Alabama.
Yeah.
Alabama wins the championship game.
Okay.
So we got 5 undefeated teams from the Big Ten and the SEC.
Well, no, that'd be 3 one-loss teams.
Excuse me.
Yeah, 3
not undefeated. 2 undefeated and 3 one-loss teams.
3 one-losses. And that's not including
TCU.
Still
undefeated. Clemson,
yeah. Undefeated.
And maybe USC, maybe Oregon.
USC. Well, they lost to Utah. Yeah. I mean,
They lost to Utah, which we haven't even got to, but we'll
We
talk
haven't
about
got
that
to
in a second. Greg, I'm not trying to hijack.
No,
anything.
you're good. So I'll give you the scenario just to because we're gonna do spoiler alert. We're gonna do SEC scenarios in our next segment here. We're gonna twist this and play scenario game twice. But the scenario for Michigan and Ohio State, to me, and I'm just one man, but the scenario would be one team gets in from the SEC. They essentially need Tennessee or Georgia at this point to run the table, right? I think it would. It's more likely it's Georgia, but whoever wins that game between Tennessee and Georgia, they need that team to then beat whoever they play in the SEC title game, which we know who they're going to play.
Alabama.
But if there's a 2-loss Alabama team,
they're out,
and a 1-loss Tennessee or Georgia, then the undefeated Tennessee or Georgia is in. I'm going to go ahead and assume Clemson's in as an ACC favorite because the committee's not going to put 4 teams from 2 conferences in. That would be disaster, especially if there's like that would be too chaotic until they expand, right? So realistically, it would be 1 loss Georgia or Tennessee versus 1 loss Michigan, depending on how that looks to Ohio State. And I think, let's just say it's Tennessee. Georgia beats Alabama. Alabama's now lost to both. Georgia's in. Are they really putting a 1-loss Tennessee in who beat Alabama, who loses at that point over Michigan losing? I don't think so.
Are they both? But the thing is are they both going to get in?
Michigan and Ohio State? I think they would, yeah.
No. Tennessee and Michigan in that scenario.
No. It would be Clemson. It would be Georgia at undefeated. It would be Ohio State, and Michigan would be the 4 to me. If they lose a close game to
over Tennessee.
Over 1-loss Tennessee, yeah.
And see, that's what about an undefeated TCU?
Well, I don't think that's going to happen. Is my answer. But
or what about a 1-loss USC that wins the Pac-12 championship?
I think SC's done themselves in personally.
Yeah,
if this scenario plays, if there's a Big Ten team that just loses to Ohio State and an SEC team that just loses to the champ, like USC's resume just can't compete with that at this point, right? A loss to Utah looks worse.